Great. Well, a very, very warm welcome, everybody, to our webinar today. My name's David Little. I'm the Chief Executive and the founder of the TCM Group, and I have with me
Sandy Brown.
And Sandy is the newly appointed coordinator of our PECS program here at TCM Group, the Professional Early Conciliation Service. It's a very, very popular webinar today, so I hope that you enjoy this session. We'll be taking you through our PECS initiative, what it is, how it works, why we're doing it, and sharing with you some very interesting insights about the potential role of early conciliation and how it works alongside other services that we provide at TCM. As I said in my email to you yesterday, there's an opportunity for you to ask questions to us. Do you got to attend this still? Start broadcasting.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everybody, a very, very warm welcome to this webinar this afternoon. My name is David Little and I'm the Chief Executive of the TCM Group and the founder of the organisation. And I have with me this afternoon
Sandy Brown.
Sandy Brown is our newly appointed coordinator for our Professional Early Conciliation Service. Looking forward to working with you this afternoon to talk you through why we've established our Professional Early Conciliation Service. We'll talk a little bit about how it works and why it works, and how perhaps it differs from the ACAS Early Conciliation Service, which I know many people are talking about as an attempt to try and reduce cases going through to Employment Tribunal. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. As I said in my email to you yesterday, if you have any questions at all relating to the early conciliation service that we're setting up and running, please do feel free to ask questions. You should have in front of you the Citrix online dashboard. You can type questions in there. We'll pick those up, and there is an opportunity for us to respond to any questions at the end of the webinar. But if you've got anything you'd like to say to us or ask us during the course of the webinar, please feel free to do so. We'll also run a little poll at the end of the webinar to see what your thoughts are in relation to the professional service, and we'll explain to you a little bit more about how that will work in due course. So like I said, a very warm welcome. Our webinars tend to last for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. They are recorded as well, so they are available online through our YouTube channel and through our website, and feel free to share and distribute those to anybody who you think might be interested. Okay, so over the course of today, and I'll hand over in a moment to Sandy, but I'll explain in a moment just why have we done this? Why is the TCM Group, a well-known, well-respected provider of mediation services, decided that the time is right for us to also extend our services into employment relations and employment contract breakdown? We'll provide a critique of early conciliation. I'm a huge fan of early conciliation. I'm a huge fan of what ACAS are trying to do to be able to reduce the number of cases going through to the Employment Tribunal. And I actively supported the government through the development of the Enterprise and Regulatory Reform Act and the provisions therein to be able to encourage early conciliation. However, I don't think it's necessarily the only route to be able to resolve disputes, and I'll be setting out a critique, as I've mentioned, of why the problems I see with ACAS early conciliation. Sandy will talk through our Professional Early Conciliation Service and set out what it is, and we'll talk about how it differs from the ACAS scheme. We'll talk about how it works. It's a very simple model, and we've developed a flow chart for you to be able to help you understand how PECS would work and how you could make use of this approach. And we'll look at the kind of disputes that are available to be able to be resolved through PECS, and some very interesting areas where ACAS are unable to intervene, and where I think TCM provides a very innovative and potentially very effective and proactive alternative to ACAS. As I've mentioned already, there's an opportunity throughout for you to ask questions of any kind. So why is TCM doing this? Well, for those of you who know TCM, TCM stands for Total Conflict Management. So I set Total Conflict Management up 13 years this month, almost to the day. And I remember when I was on the back of my MBA class, learning about total quality management, integrated systems for quality assurance within organisations, and also as a mediator, I was very interested about how organisations integrated mediation. I came up with the name total conflict management. And the basis for it is about the integration of dispute resolution systems across the organisation, supporting leaders and managers to have difficult conversations and resolve issues at source, supporting HR professionals to create the conditions for dialogue, reforming the policy framework within organisations to move from grievance to resolution, and critically also helping those people who are experiencing significant breakdown in relations to resolve their disputes and reduce the need to go into an employment tribunal or a formal litigation system, which in my view was damaging, destructive, extremely costly, had a negative impact on the reputation of the organisation, and critically did not resolve the issues that it was designed to resolve. So PECS fits in with TCM's holistic or whole systems thinking in relation to dispute resolution. We believe that our new approach offers a proactive approach to dispute resolution. It's one step before what we might see as the ACAS Early Conciliation Scheme, where we believe at TCM that is actually late conciliation. Does the modern HR director want to leave a critical stage of employee relations to receiving a phone call from a conciliation officer from ACAS who they've never met, they don't know, they've got no relationship with, and this is a defining moment in the relationship between them and their employee? HR directors say to me, David, that's not right. That's not going to work for us. We want to be proactive. We want to be able to be responsive. We want to address these issues and not receive a phone call from an anonymous call centre somewhere telling me that I've got a dispute with an employee. That's not how I want to run my organisation. This is not a time for business as usual, is what HR directors are telling me. So we want to offer a choice to companies who don't automatically want to use ACAS. We're not going to be critical here of ACAS. I think ACAS do an incredibly important job and deliver a high quality service. But there is room in the market for choice and there's room in the market for competition. And that's what I think we're doing very interestingly. And I believe that the Enterprise and Regulatory Reform Act, whilst having some very important provision contained therein, actually creates an unhealthy and unfair monopoly position for ACAS in what is an increasingly growing and developing marketplace. And given that ACAS are predominantly funded through the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills, I would suggest that that same department should also be encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship and creativity from organisations such as the TCM Group. And it surprises me and concerns me that the very same government who should be supporting entrepreneurship are actually blocking that and impeding our opportunity to grow as a private sector organisation. So again, if you'll know TCM, you'll know our thinking around whole systems approach to dispute resolution. But I thought I'd share this model with you. This defines our company, it defines our approach, it defines everything that we stand for as a business. As you'll see on the left-hand side of the picture, the psychological contract, the majority of the work that we do at TCM is a restorative mediation using the FAIR framework to help resolve the issues arising from a breakdown in the psychological contract. Rebuilding trust, rebuilding communication, rebuilding confidence, creating dialogue and creating the conditions for dialogue so that issues can be resolved effectively at source without the need for formal grievance or other processes. Increasingly, we could draw on the Royal Mail case study, which we shared on a recent webinar. Royal Mail increasingly are using mediation in industrial relations environments, and at TCM we're also providing support and training for Royal Mail's industrial relations mediators. In fact, we'll be running that team and managing that team. So at TCM we have experience of working both on the psychological contract and in the employment contract space. PECS fits neatly between these two areas. And as Sandy will be explaining in a moment, through an effective triage process which Sandy will be organising, we can work with the employer and the employee to establish, is there potential for restoring a relationship between the two parties? Is it irretrievably broken down? Can we go back to mediation and try and resolve the issues and get back to work? Or has the relationship broken down and do we need to enter into a dialogue to help the parties achieve a settlement agreement through conciliation? I won't say much more on that because I think Sandy will share more of her thinking around this. But PECS is an important stage for us in the breakdown or the transition from a psychological contract breakdown to an employment contract breakdown, and fits very neatly in our whole system thinking. So I'm going to hand over to Sandy, who's going to provide us with, in the first instance, a critique of ACAS Early Conciliation and take you through how it's going to work. So Sandy, over to you.
Yes. So before I go ahead and critique ACAS, I just want to say that I'm extremely passionate about TCM's Early Conciliation Service, which is going to provide a real alternative to ACAS's Early Conciliation Service. And these are one of the reasons for that is we can go through the problems with ACAS's Early Conciliation. The first problem is ACAS's Early Conciliation really early conciliation? Well, we here at TCM would say it's actually really late conciliation. The question is, how can ACAS sensibly call a legal requirement to contact them just before an employment tribunal, just before attending an employment tribunal? How can that be early conciliation? It's not at the grievance stage, it's not halfway through the procedure. We would say it's a last-ditch attempt to settle the dispute right at the door of the employment tribunal. We want to provide an alternative to that. By this time that the parties want to submit a claim to the employment tribunal, battle lines would have been drawn, parties' positions would have become entrenched. Parties would have already decided who is right and who is wrong, and in their mind they would have been consumed with these polarized positions, and it would make it very difficult to move forward from their position. Further, unnecessary time and expense would have already been incurred by the time they prepare for an employment tribunal, contacting the solicitor, being absent from the office, stress to the family, children, and parties are going to be reluctant to contact ACAS when they've simply come too far in a dispute that they've decided the other side is the enemy. That moves on to ACAS's service, which is more or less a one-size-fits-all approach to dispute resolution. ACAS will be treating all the disputes the same in a way that's fair, because when they ring the party, they won't ask about the dispute, but at the same time, by not knowing what the dispute involves until they've actually started talking to both parties in more detail, they won't have any idea about the business needs. Here at TCM, we consider the business needs, the relationship, whether it needs to be resolved, whether relationships have broken down. We have that in-depth analysis. Finally, I would say that ACAS could easily become overburdened, as they have a monopoly all over the UK, all over the disputes, all over the UK. A private sector company such as TCM, we would offer choice to employers and employees. That moves me straight on to PECS. So what is PECS and what does PECS stand for? Well, PECS is the Professional Early Conciliation Service. It's a proactive, efficient conciliation service. Why wait until an employer and an employee have got to the stage where they are at the tribunal? Why not come to TCM earlier? Be proactive. Try and resolve the dispute earlier. This service is open to all employers and all employees nationwide. Anyone can contact TCM. TCM can provide a nationwide service. We have mediators all over the country who can deal with any disputes at any time. This is a real alternative to ACAS. I will talk a bit more about PECS and how it's managed, but it will be triaged. So what that means is when we receive a call about a dispute, we will be looking at whether the relationship can be restored or whether it has irretrievably broken down. Is the relationship really over, or is there an opportunity for restorative mediation? Do the parties need to reflect and consider what they need from the workplace? If so, is it appropriate for them to go to a tribunal? It may well be that the relationship has broken down, in which case conciliation may be more suitable. And that can be achieved either by phone, or through Skype, or a meeting face-to-face. Conciliation is also important, and ACAS will only be using the phone to try and conciliate, to come to some arrangement between the parties. Whereas we say, in this modern day and age, why not use Skype? Why not meet up if possible? Finally, PECS will offer a settlement agreement, which is not just a financial settlement. We will consider the psychological needs. This settlement agreement will be developed by a professional mediator, which allows psychological needs to be met as well as financial issues to be resolved. We want to ensure that the settlement agreement contains and truly reflects the parties' intentions, whether that includes an apology or an expression of regret, but it needs to be something that the parties can walk away with knowing that they are satisfied, not just a financial settlement.
Thank you. And before we go into looking at PECS, just to remind you, if you've got any questions about anything that you're hearing, anything that we're saying that you think you don't agree with, or that you particularly do agree with, or would like us to highlight in more detail, again, please feel free. If you use the little dashboard on your screen, you can put a question in there, just press send, we'll pick that up, and we'd be very, very happy to come back and answer any questions that you might have. So back over to you, Sandy.
Yes.
I'm going to take through what actually happens when a case comes through to you at PECS.
Yes. So any employee or employer can either ring the free hotline number, the 0300 number, or they can email me at pecs@thetcmgroup.com. When I receive that inquiry, I will consider the details of the dispute carefully, discuss this, and then decide which route would be more suitable, either fair mediation, which includes a one-day mediation offered at a very competitive rate. That would be where I would assess that the relationship can be worked on, it can be restored, and that would be the overall aim, to restore the working relationship. And we would, TCM would mediate using the FAIR model, which is the Facilitate, Appreciate, Innovate and Resolve model. And TCM have a 90% success rate in using that model to resolve disputes. The second route would be if the parties have decided that they are unable to work together, that the relationship has reached such a stage where it would be more healthy for the parties to walk away, and we would help them reach a settlement agreement, which would include not just a financial agreement, but any expressions of regret and apology, as I spoke about earlier. And in that regard, we would work with the employer to decide whether a fixed fee would be set for this conciliation, or whether to charge a 10% of the settlement agreement. I must emphasize, if an agreement is not reached after negotiating with both parties, TCM will not charge. That is clear, because we believe in obtaining the best outcome for the parties. And so these are the two routes, and it would either be fair mediation or conciliation.
Again, what stands out for me, what I'm hearing from you say here, Sandy, is the important stage in the triage, and really trying to focus on the parties' needs. And one of the things that I'm really impressed in the PECS approach is it's very needs-based. Clearly, the Enterprise and Regulatory Reform Act met a need to reduce the number of cases going through to Employment Tribunal, whether there were cases without merit or vexatious cases, or just a general approach to trying to reduce cases going through to Employment Tribunal. So the need of the justice system is fulfilled through early conciliation. But I've never heard anyone talk about early conciliation in the way that you are, focusing on the needs of the business and focusing on the needs of the disputing parties. And it really excites me to think that we're developing a system and approach which is based on the needs of the parties, not based on the needs of a system. And I think this is really powerful, and I think it's, for me, it's rocking the sort of very foundation of dispute resolution and putting the disputing parties at the centre of the circle, and I'm very impressed by that.
Yes, absolutely. The parties are the most important. not reducing the numbers of claims going to an employment tribunal. This is all about the parties. Thank you, David. So what kind of disputes are suitable for PECS? Well, that's simple. Any kind of dispute, virtually every kind of workplace dispute imaginable would be suitable for the PECS service. This also involves claims involving multiple claimants. Now, if you have a dispute where there are a number of claimants, ACAS are legally unable to deal with these kind of disputes. We here at TCM are experienced at dealing with claims involving multiple claimants, disputes involving multiple claimants. This is what we do. This is what we are experienced in, and all our mediators can deal with claims involving multiple claimants, or disputes, should I say. It's not a claim, it's a dispute. Allegations of discrimination. Now this is actually very, very important, because cases involving discrimination, when they reach an employment tribunal, if the employee is successful, there is no cap on the amount of compensation that the tribunal can award an employer to pay to the employee. There is no cap. So these cases are very risky for employers and for any kind of business. So we say, why wait until you reach an employment tribunal stage with a discrimination case? Why not do something about that earlier? Be proactive. And this is what we are hearing, as David said. HR managers do want to be proactive. They want to try and resolve these disputes before they get to a stage where there is no cap on discrimination cases. We also can deal with allegations of bullying and harassment. These are very difficult cases, but we are experienced at dealing with bullying and harassment cases, and definitions of bullying vary from person to person. Any kind of workplace grievances, disputes relating to flexible working. Well, the law is changing in that regard, so that's bound to bring up all sorts of disputes. So that is an area that we'll be closely working with parties on. And also disputes relating to performance and the management of capability, as well as team or collective disputes. So how is PECS different? Well, PECS offers choice and true early conciliation at any stage of the workplace dispute. Parties can choose who they want to resolve their dispute. They do not have to be forced to go to ACAS. They have a choice in this day and age. Personal service. People want to feel that personal service. They don't just want to be a number on a list. And when they speak to me, when I triage the case, I will offer them that personal service. We can deal with multiple claimants, and we will offer that personal, tailored service to the parties. We will also help re-establish relations or quickly resolve. So if we want to re-establish relations using mediation, or if the dispute needs to be resolved, that will be conciliation. We will also take into account the wider range of parties' needs. As David mentioned earlier, the parties in the dispute are the centre of, they are the most important. This is about the parties and their needs, making a difference nationwide. Also, discrimination, bullying and harassment cases, as I've already talked about, they are very, very important. People don't want to shy away from those. People should come and use TCM's service to try and deal with these. And we, of course, have a very high success rate in this regard, 90% success rate.
Thanks, Sandy. Thank you so much. It is inspiring to hear this, and I think it's interesting. Again, with we presented a Royal Mail case study at the last webinar where we were looking at the introduction of the resolution policy, and Royal Mail will reported down 100% success rate in all of the bullying and harassment cases, that have been referred to us. This was about a month or so ago. We've been working, I know there's a number of our associate resolution consultants on this webinar, so this is a nod to everyone out there who's working with or for TCM. We're still at 100% success rate with Royal Mail Group, and the cases that are coming through from Royal Mail are complex bullying and harassment cases, and these are the kind of cases that weren't being resolved. So this isn't hyperbole. This is happening right now in really tough situations. We have got some questions, so thank you very much indeed for that. So if we can just take a moment to have a look at the kind of questions. In fact, we have quite a few questions. So, so one person's asking, can we explain a little bit more about the psychological aspect and the needs that the parties might have? But if we think about dispute and the root cause of conflict, the root cause of conflict is a sense of my needs not being met, or my not being able to express my values in a way which I deem to be fair or appropriate. As a result of that, I often experience, and the parties experience, what we broadly describe as the fight, flight, freeze or fall response, and that's driven by the rush of hormones. We saw that certainly when we saw the Uruguay match recently, the rush of hormones, the adrenaline and the cortisol, and we know that the amygdala hijack, which probably happened with old Luis Suarez, who will be paying the price for that, of course. So the psychological needs of the parties in conflict arises because of our response to the circumstances that create the conflict, giving rise to causes for loss. Yet when we go into dispute resolution, this is for me one of the biggest challenges in early conciliation. We don't focus on the psychological or emotional needs that the parties bring, their hopes, their fears, their aspirations, their perceptions, their feelings, their goals, their beliefs, their values. We talk about it purely in financial terms. Well, it's not right. I think parties are far more complex than that, Susan, who asked this question. For me, the parties need to have an opportunity to be heard, to gain understanding, to gain awareness and insight, to express their needs and goals, to feel that the other party listens and has some empathy and engages with them in a meaningful way. And that's what PECS offers. And that's where I think early conciliation potentially has the potential for falling down, because it fails to address these underlying root causes of the conflict. The triage process will last not too long. It'll be around about 30 minutes. We anticipate that the majority of requests through PECS in the first instance are likely to be employer-led rather than employee-led. That's because of the limitations that we have of the ability to reach out to employees. We haven't designed that in. We just anticipate that's likely to be the case in the majority of its circumstances. So we won't have to go to the same difficult that ACAS does of trying to find the employer. Once we've spoken to the employer, we'll then contact the employee, and that process in totality will take about 30 minutes, but it could, obviously it depends on people's availabilities, our ability to actually undertake that. But it's a simple process, and it relates to what do the parties need and what do they want to achieve as an outcome. The settlement agreement requires the recipient to obtain legal advice for the agreement. How does PECS agreement satisfy this requirement, or would they need to see a solicitor separately? Each of these cases will be taken on a case-by-case basis, but we are going to be working with the ACAS template settlement agreement, and that includes the legal provision. And from the shift from the compromise agreement and the change to the settlement agreement means that it's not specifically required that the parties seek legal advice before they sign off the settlement agreement, although in some cases that may be advisable, but it's not the same as the compromise agreement, where that was an absolute prerequisite before the parties could enter. That was one of the changes implemented through the formation of the settlement agreement. But again, that will be taken on a case-by-case basis. How long would it take to revert a client with a recommendation of, say, route 1 or route 2 from fair mediation or settlement? Well, all of our mediation interventions anywhere in the UK are undertaken within 5 working days of receipt of referral. That's one of our strict key performance indicators. Between 5 and 10 working days, although we tend to achieve 5 days or sooner. So the conciliation or the mediation process will take 5 days from the completion of triage, and that's a commitment that we have for all of our customers. We don't hang around. Obviously, unlike early conciliation where the clock stops, the clock doesn't stop if they use PECS. So of course, if the mediation or conciliation isn't successful, the parties will still then go into the ACAS early conciliation and try and resolve it through that route. So the sooner that we can get around the table and try and resolve it, the quicker. So 5 days is the answer to that question. So thank you very much indeed. Gosh, there's lots of questions. So if Glyn, this is a great question. If having tried conciliation through PECS and it fails, does PECS provide a certificate that that person can then use to proceed to raise the tribunal claim the same way as ACAS does? Glyn, your question gets to the absolute heart of the matter. We do not have statutory authority to issue an early conciliation certificate in the event that it's not successful. The biggest question that I have is why not? Why has the Enterprise and Regulatory Reform Act named ACAS as the only provider of a statutory certificate? I believe that the market should be opened up, and I will be seeking a review of the legislation and working with members of Parliament and lawyers to identify, is it possible for private sector mediation companies to issue an early conciliation certificate? We're clearly operating in the statutory environment, and surely there would be really stringent quality assurance tests, and we would be working closely with the trade body for mediators in the UK, the Professional Mediators Association, to ensure that if the market was opened up, that any mediation company wanting to issue an early conciliation certificate would be required to sign up to the Professional Mediators Association accreditation scheme. And we're developing the accreditation scheme in partnership with the CIPD, large organisations and other providers now to ensure that mediation companies such as TCM subscribe to the highest standards of quality assurance. But I think quality can be the only reason and the only block, and we'll certainly be challenging that. So thanks for that question. It really does cut to.
Can I just add something to that, to Glyn? That if the parties have tried PECS and it does fail, then there is nothing stopping the parties from contacting ACAS, and they can let ACAS know that they've tried conciliation or mediation through PECS, and ACAS will be more than happy to issue that certificate. So it doesn't prevent them from proceeding, and they wouldn't have to go through the same process again.
Yes.
So the courts will just be, the tribunal will just be pleased that mediation was attempted.
Absolutely. It's a reasonable step by both of the parties to try this. In the words of a very good friend of mine, Carol Russell, who's the one of the employee relations managers at BT, and she speaks very passionately about mediation. And as she says, whenever I hear her talking at conferences, everyone gains and no one loses. And I think that's very much the line here with PECS. Susan, thanks again for your question. Can you give an overview of how it works? And I think that's probably a point where I should hand back to Sandy, and we'll begin to sort of finalise. I think we've gone through the flow chart and the kind of the key parts. Is there anything else to be added in there, Sandy, before we wrap up and maybe take any more questions in terms of how it works?
No, I'll be more than happy to take any inquiries from Susan by email if she would like to know anything more.
Thank you. And I think that what we're trying to do is to make this very, very simple. Dispute resolution doesn't have to be complicated. We want to keep conflict out of court. That's what our objective is at TCM. We want to give people the best opportunity to resolve their issues in a constructive way. Calling the helpline, getting good quality support from Sandy and colleagues here within the TCM group, helping to identify the most effective route to resolution, and then quickly enacting that route to resolution. And ultimately, if conciliation doesn't work, if there's no cost attached to it, we think we've designed a really strong approach where we call it no win-win, no fee. And we think it's going to really offer something very different and hopefully work. Again, if you're on recent webinars of mine, you'll know that I'm working with a large number of organisations, an increasing number of organisations now, to promote the resolution policy as an alternative to the grievance process. And whilst we've argued today that early conciliation is in fact late conciliation, I would also suggest that PECS is maybe leaving it a little too late. And we would really be recommending to HR directors and others to be thinking about the policy, the framework and the culture that you have within your organisations. And by replacing your grievance policy with a resolution policy, it creates the kind of environment that promotes dialogue, encourages disputes to be resolved constructively, and creates the conditions for resolution, which would mean that perhaps PECS itself isn't needed to be used, but that's a way off. Maybe one. It's ambitious, Sandy, I think. Okay, so we're going to run a little poll now. If you have got any other questions, by the way, please do feel free to ask them. We're very happy to hear them. We realise this is very new and people are unsure of it, so do feel free to fire away. But for now, we're going to open a poll and see, would you be willing to use PECS? Okay, very interesting. So 56% of people on the call said that they would be willing to use PECS, 39% undecided, maybes, and only 6% of people on the call said no, that they wouldn't be willing to use PECS. Well, hopefully, for those of you who said yes, thank you so much, and that's really reassuring to hear that something that's so new and so innovative is already something that you'll be willing to use. For those of you who are maybe 39% of people on this webinar, if there's anything that we can do to help you form that view that PECS would work, and one of the things Sandy and I are happy to do is to travel to organisations, to deliver presentations, to talk to HR, employee relations team, to talk to counsel and lawyers and others within the organisation to make the case, and to listen to your questions and concerns. We realise it's quite radical. For the 6% who wouldn't be willing to use PECS, I'm not sure what to say. Hopefully when we do another webinar you will be willing to sign up, and perhaps in a few months' time we'll have a bit more evidence to present to you of the efficacy of PECS. So, but thank you for coming onto the webinar and having an open mind anyway. And if you do, I will be interested to hear from those of you who said you wouldn't be willing to use it, as to the reasons behind that and why, to help us understand what we could be doing differently. Sandy,
definitely, I would be
helpful.
Very interested to hear. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So in conclusion, just drawing the session to a conclusion now, PECS is different and new. But everything in the world has started from a seed of innovation and someone willing to do something differently. And I think, we pride ourselves at TCM on being innovative and being creative and creating initiatives which we think work. We believe this is going to work because we believe that by putting the parties at the centre of our circle, it means it's starting from a strong position. But we are asking people to take a bit of a chance. We realise the whole area of early conciliation is new. We love early conciliation at TCM. We have been knocking on the door of the government for a long time to promote early conciliation, and we think that the work that ACAS do is important. But why should ACAS have it all their own way? This is strengthening the ACAS brand, and it's giving them a monopoly position. I don't think that's fair, not in a modern free market economy in which we live. And PECS benefits from a really high level of experience, which is unrivaled. The business is 13 years. We had our 13th birthday last Friday. We've been around for a long time doing this work and making a real difference. So hopefully that will be something that we can bring to organisations. So just looking if there's any more questions. There's not. I think Glyn. So at the moment it would need to go back to ACAS. Yes, that's correct. If PECS is unsuccessful and the party still wanted to lodge their claim with the ET, it may be unsuccessful, but there's maybe a change in mindset or attitude. So if it's unsuccessful and the employee still wishes to lodge a claim at Employment Tribunal, they will still have to contact ACAS in the first instance. That is the case, and I don't see any chance of that changing anytime soon. However, as I said, we will be lobbying for that particular change. Will we be making the slides available? Absolutely, we will. We'll send a copy of the slides out to everyone who registered for the webinar, whether they attended or not. And also this is being recorded and we'll get this up online so you can hear it. And we also tend to get our webinars typed up and transcripted. It takes a few weeks, but we will have a transcript of the webinar as well. So it just leaves me to say, from me, a massive thank you for coming along. And
yes, thank you everyone for listening. And again, if you have any questions, please do email me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think this was Sandy's first webinar today, Sandy,
yes,
was it? So I think we'll all agree that she's done a fantastic job as well. So,
thank you.
So well done, and thank you very much for your work on this, Sandy.
Thank you.
Well done. Great. Okay, well have a lovely afternoon, everybody, and look forward to welcoming you onto our next webinar, which I can't even think what the date is, but you'll get something from us in due course. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.